with this frequency distribution table right here. The idea now is that we're going to try to draw, the first thing that we're going to learn here is learning how to make a histogram. Right? Making a histogram. Right? We're going to learn how to make a histogram. So now, the idea now, first of all, before we get into the idea of making a histogram, we need to divide our data set here into classes. So, divide, right, the data set into classes. Now, because I'm teaching you how to do this, so I will choose a class myself. But imagine for yourself, when you are doing your real work, right, you can create your own class and you can decide for yourself your own class of data. So this is what I mean right here. So now let's say, once again, if you are looking back, I'm going to switch over to the data so that you can see it one more time. Okay, so now for the data set right here, now your lowest value here is a 43, am I right? Okay. Your highest data value here is 94, right? So your data range is going anywhere between 43 and the 94, right? Which is reasonable to have your first class. You can, so now, if I'm switching, let me switch back to my notes right here. If you can see, in making a class now, dividing your data set into classes, what I can see is that I can make the first class to be any data values in between 40 and 50. Okay, now 40 and 50 here, the convention here is that I want my x has to be anywhere greater than or equal to 40. Basically, a data value that falling into this class right here must be at least equal to 40 or higher, but then it must be strictly less than 50. Are you seeing what I mean now? All right. And so now, likewise, so what happened when you have data value being 50? Then that will go on to my next class, my next higher class, which is from 50 to 60. So once again, this class right here contains data values in anywhere starting at 50, to anywhere less than 60. Okay? So my class right here contains data anywhere starting at 50, but to anything less than 60. Okay? That's what I'm doing for my second class. So on and on, you can create like from 70 to 80, right? And then 80 to 90, and then you can also, and then lastly you have 90 to 100. Right? So these are your classes. All right. So now when we get into getting the histograms, this is the idea right here. Now maybe I should fill in the class between 60 and 70 also. I shouldn't skip it out. Alright, but here's the thing. The idea now is that, let's say, in the class between 40 and 50, right here, in that class interval, you are going to count into your data sets, right? This is for data set 1. You are going to count how many data values falling into this class. So if I'm looking back at my data, set right here, data set 1, once again, if I'm looking back at my data set 1, I mean the whole problem that we're working right now is for data set 1, right? So what I see is in between 40 and 50, I mean anywhere starting with 40 and adding up anywhere less than 50, then we have 43, is that going into the class? Yes. 45, is it going into the class? Yes. Okay, 47, right, is it going into the class? Yes. So we got 3 of them, right? But 50, is 50 going into the class? No, because 50 here equals 50. So 50 actually belongs to the class between 50 and 60. So what I can see here, is into my first class, there are 3 of them. Right? We're seeing 3 data values that fall into my first class. Now for my second class, let's see, I have about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 of them. So that would be 6 of them, right? And you are going to help me out with this as well. So And then in the class between 60 and 70, let's say I have 2, 4, 6, right? It's another, yep, there are 6 of them. And then in the class between 70 and 80, let's say 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. There are 11 data items, right? That falls into that class between 70 and 80. So you can see that so far this class here has the most data values in it, right? The most number of data values. But then let's see, in between 80 and 90, let's see how many of them. We got 80, like 280, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. So it's still a big class, but somehow, it's a big class, but still somehow smaller than just the preceding class, right? And then in the last class right here, in between 90 and 100, let's see what we have. 2, 4, and 5. So I got 5 data values that fall into the last class right there. Okay, so I hope you have counted together with me. Because I mean, one thing to be cautious, it's a warning. Doing statistics, it's easy to miscount. It's easy to make mistakes. So make sure you keep double checking your work. Alright? You have to keep that as a rule of thumb. Make sure you keep double checking your work because it's very easy to miscount. It's very easy to make mistakes, make computational error. It's not hard problems to do, but it's easy to make mistakes. Alright? So, as long as back to the idea of making the histograms now, we have finished classifying we have finished making our classes, right? My first class got 3 items, my second class got 6 items, my third class got 6 items again, my fourth class here got 11 items, my fifth class got 9 items, and my last class here got 5 items. Okay? So now, I am going to draw for myself. Now you probably have heard of the term the bar graphs, right? The idea here is similar to making the bar graphs. So what I'm doing here is that I draw for myself. I'm drawing for myself. Okay? The x and the y, you can imagine that's the x and the y, but then this is just about the classes. Think of the classes just like the categories of your data values, right? I mean, some data values fall into this category, some data values fall into a different category. So what you do here is, you can imagine your first class here, this class right here is for data in between 40 to 50, right? And your second class right here is data in between 50 and 60. Everybody agree with me here? That's how I do it. Okay, and then your next one here, your next class is between, so each interval right here is the class. And then this is the next class. Of course, they have to be adjacent, right? And then this interval right here, in between that, is the class. So what I have here is the class between 60 to 70. Okay? That's why I intentionally kind of write the interval right in between that. And then I got between 70 and 80. Okay? 70 to 80. And then I got 80 to 90. Okay? And then lastly, I got 90 to 100. Also, maybe I'm going to mention this later, but then, so now for the first class, the class between 40 and 50, right? How many of them are there? There are 3 of them. So I'm going to do 1, 2, and 3. So this is 3 right here. So my first class, I'm going to draw a rectangle up reaching the height 3. So I'm going to draw for myself that rectangle bar right there. That rectangle bar represents so once again, the height of that rectangle bar represents my class frequency, right? I got, 3 data items. So my vertical bar, my rectangular bar, I can shade it in just to, to make it look a little more fancy, right? The next class, which is the next rectangle over, is going to have frequency 6, right? Which is the height is going to be double as high. So 6 is about here. So my next class is going to be that much. Okay, and what? Alright, and once again you can shade it in. So that is my second class, right? The class in between 50 and 60. My third class is having the same height. So I'm drawing another rectangle over to the right. And this is how it looks like. Okay? And my next class over, we got 11 of them. So 5 more. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So you can see that in my next class, right, the height is going to be like that, right? And that's how you draw the class. That's how you draw the class between 70 and 80, okay? Because there are, once again, the height here is 11. That is because you have the frequency for that class here is 11. Okay? Now moving on to the class between 80 and 90. Now let's see how many of them do we have. We got 9, right? So 9 is about right there. See it now? Everybody convinced here? Okay, so I'm drawing my rectangle over. Okay? And that's how I get my rectangle. Okay? I mean, I'm not an artist here, so don't expect that my rectangle is going to look, you know, pretty. You see what I'm saying? Alright, so that's my, you know, 5th class, right? And my last class here, which is the class between 90 and 100s, there are 5 of them. So it's a little bit less than, so 5 is about right there. Okay, so it's a little bit less than, so it's about right there. Okay, so that's how I draw my, okay, and so as soon as this point here, that's how you make your histogram. Alright, so now, ladies and gentlemen, you have finished creating for yourself a histogram. Okay, and that's the idea of a histogram. This is your histogram right there. Okay, so I was about to say earlier, what I was about to say earlier is that now these classes here, the classes, you notice, it's always a good idea, not just a good idea, it's always the best idea to choose the classes in a way that they have equal width, right? And so now, the difference between these, I mean the distance in each class right here, we call it the class width. So the difference between the upper end and the lower end right there, we call that the class width. Okay? So class width here equals 10. Am I right? Because simply think about it. Taking 100 minus 90, that equals 10, right? The same thing right here, 90 minus 80, that gives you 10, right? I'm talking about the class width, the size of the class. I mean the width of the class, not the size, the width of the class. Okay? So now that's how you make a histogram, right? And then furthermore, I mean, you can imagine at the tip of each of these, rectangle right here, okay, you can create for yourself a little dot right there somewhere right at the tip, and then you can connect these dots. I mean, you can connect these dots, like say right from 0, you can connect these dots with straight lines right there, okay, and then what you're seeing here is that you create for your, we kind of forming some kind of shape, right, that kind of go through all the heights of these things, right? And so now that curve, that kind of curved looking shape right there, we call that it's a frequency. We call that a frequency polygon. Right? We call it a frequency polygon because the idea is that, yes, the shape in general, the shape that these little segments together create is a polygon, right? And it's this polygon right here somehow gives you a visual, like, you know, where the data tends to be the most, right? You can see that it's about right there. It's where you have the most amount of data in here, right? So, you know, it tells you something about the graph, right? I mean, later on we're going to look further into that. But right now, once again, we create for ourselves the histograms, which is these bars right here, and then we connect the dots and create the segments. I mean, we can making the segments, connecting the dots right here on each tip of the rectangle, and then you create for yourself what's so-called a frequency polygon. Okay, so that is how you make a histogram. Okay, and a histogram here is one of the important visual tools for you to in order to analyze your statistical, you know, data set. Okay. All right. So now moving on to the next type of thing that you need to learn about data sets here is that you need to be able to create what's called a stem plot. You are now learning how to make a stem plot.